The rain had a rhythm that night, soft but persistent, like it was trying to whisper secrets through the glass. I stood behind the counter of C.N. Story, my bookstore tucked between the cliffs and the sea, the scent of old pages mixing with the salt in the air. Most nights were quiet. This one should have been no different. Until he walked in. The bell above the door chimed, its sound sharp in the hush. He was soaked through, dark hair clinging to his forehead, leather jacket damp, boots leaving small puddles on the wooden floor. He didn't shake off the rain like most people would. He just looked around like he'd been here before. I watched him from behind the counter, one hand wrapped around my half-drunk cup of chamomile tea. "Can I help you?" He took a few steps inside, eyes scanning the shelves. "I was just passing through. Saw the lights." I nodded, unconvinced. The bookstore lights barely reached the street on a night like this. "What kind of books are you looking for?" I asked, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "History. Old letters. Stories people forgot to finish." A strange answer. My fingers tightened slightly on the cup. He walked deeper into the store, not waiting for permission. "There's a section that used to be here, isn't there?" he said suddenly, pointing toward the back wall. My breath caught. That part of the shop had been sealed off for years. No signs marked it. No one knew it ever existed. A long-forgotten trapdoor beneath a loose floorboard, hidden behind dusty shelving units and false backs. "How do you know that?" I asked quietly. He turned to me, dark eyes calm but unreadable. "The floor slopes there. Just slightly. Like something was covered up." He was lying. People don't notice something like that, not unless they're looking for it. "I think you've made a mistake," I said, forcing my voice steady. "This is a small-town bookstore. Nothing special here but damp paperbacks and coastal poetry." He smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Then why does it smell like salt and cedar behind that shelf, like the wood's been exposed recently?" I took a slow breath. My heartbeat tapped louder than the rain on the window panes. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Callan." No last name. No explanation. "And what are you looking for?" "Callan." He tilted his head slightly. "The truth, maybe. Or something close enough to it." Later that night, long after he left, I stood in front of the shelf he'd pointed to. My hand hovered near the warped wood, that barely noticeable slope only I was supposed to know about. The trapdoor had been sealed for almost a decade, ever since. I closed my eyes. That part of me was supposed to stay locked away. Like the letters beneath the floor. Like the name I hadn't spoken in years. But now a stranger knew. And somehow, I had a feeling the floor wouldn't stay closed for much longer. The rain lingered into morning, clinging to the coastal town like a memory it refused to let go. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table above the bookstore, listening to the water slide down the windows, and thinking about a man named Callan who somehow knew what should have remained forgotten. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe he was sharp. Maybe he'd noticed the warping in the boards, the faint draft if you stood in the right place at the right time. But the way he'd looked at me, that calm certainty, it wasn't a guess. It was knowledge. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. By mid-morning, the shop smelled of fresh coffee and sea air. I went through the motions unstacking crates of used books, turning the closed sign to open, pretending everything was normal. But my gaze kept drifting to the back wall. To the shelf. To the place where time had once stopped. It had been 9 years since I last touched the trapdoor. I told myself I'd never go back, not after what happened. But the moment Callan walked in, the past stirred like dust in sunlight, unsettled and waiting. Around noon, I moved the ladder over and started organizing the back shelves, my hands moving books I'd memorized years ago. My fingers brushed over one volume, a thick, navy blue collection of sailor poems, and the wood beneath it gave a familiar creak. I knelt, heart thudding. Behind the lowest row of books was the faint outline of a floorboard worn smooth from age, its grain splintered where I'd once pried it open with shaking hands. Back then, I'd found the letters by accident. Old ones, tied with twine and stained with age, tucked inside a rusted tin beneath the trapdoor. I'd never told anyone. They weren't mine to share, and truthfully, I was afraid of what they meant. I hadn't opened them in years. But now I needed to know what he was looking for. I pried the wood back, slowly, carefully. The air beneath smelled of old cedar and salt, just like Callan had said. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the tin box. Its lid creaked as I lifted it, and there they were. Still tied. Still waiting. I sat on the floor, the shop quiet around me. No customers. Just me, the sound of waves somewhere beyond the walls, and the ghosts I'd tried to bury. I untied the twine. The first letter was dated 1973. The handwriting was delicate, slanted slightly right, the ink faded but legible. My dearest C. I walked the cliffs again today. It felt like you were just ahead, always just out of reach. Maybe that's what love is, in the end, trying to catch up to someone who already left. They say the sea doesn't keep secrets. But I know better. I buried mine beneath the floor. My fingers clenched around the paper. I didn't know who C or M were, but the words felt familiar. Like I'd heard them before, maybe in the breath between dreams. Or maybe I was just projecting. Memories have a cruel way of dressing themselves in someone else's clothes. But one thing was certain: these letters weren't just love notes. They were confessions. And the mention of the floor? That meant Callan wasn't just here by chance. He was connected to this. Somehow. The bell above the door rang again. I shot up, hastily sliding the letter back into the tin, pushing the floorboard back into place. I brushed off my hands, heart still pounding, and stepped out from the shelves. It wasn't Callan. Just a local woman browsing travel books. I smiled politely, answered her questions, and rang up her purchase. But my mind was already elsewhere. After she left, I locked the door again even though it was still early. I flipped the sign back to closed. I needed time. Space. Answers. Back in the corner of the store, I sat down with the letters once more. There were more than I remembered. Dozens. Some newer than the others. One of them had no dust on it at all. I reached for it, brow furrowing. It wasn't aged like the rest. The paper was newer, the ink fresh. The envelope was sealed but my name was on it. To Myra. That night, as the storm rolled in again, I stood by the upstairs window, the envelope still clutched in my hand. I hadn't opened it yet. My name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. It terrified me. How long had that letter been there? Who had placed it beneath the floor? And why now? As I turned the envelope over, my breath caught. A symbol was sketched on the back, tiny, almost invisible. A simple hourglass, etched in soft pencil strokes. And just beneath it, the initials, CW. The next morning, the skies cleared, but the air remained heavy, as if the storm hadn't quite finished its business. I sat behind the counter, the sealed letter with my name tucked into the pocket of my cardigan. I hadn't opened it. Not yet. I told myself it was because I needed more information. But truthfully, it was fear. Fear that whatever was inside would unravel the quiet world I had built, the one that protected me from everything I didn't want to remember. The bell rang. I didn't have to look up. I knew it was him. Callan stepped inside like he belonged here, his presence somehow softer in the daylight, but still unsettling. His gaze swept the shop, pausing briefly on me, then the back shelf. "You came back," I said, standing. "I never left," he replied, as if it were some kind of riddle. "I was just waiting for you to stop pretending you didn't want to know." My eyes narrowed. "You're awfully sure of yourself for a stranger. And you're awfully defensive for someone who clearly found something last night." His eyes flicked to my pocket. "Did you open it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past him, leading the way to the far wall. "Tell me how you know about the trapdoor." He followed, his footsteps careful, deliberate. "You won't believe me. Try me." He knelt beside me as I shifted the lowest books out of the way. "My mother used to write letters," he said. "The kind you never send. The kind meant for ghosts. She kept them in a box. One day, I read them. And she always mentioned this place," he said. "A bookstore by the sea. A trapdoor. A name she wrote over and over again, Myra." I froze. She said she never had the courage to send the last letter. That she left it in the place where everything ended. That one day, you'd find it. Slowly, I opened the floorboard. The cedar scent rose up again, blending with the quiet hush of the store. I pulled out the tin. I didn't speak as I lifted the lid and handed him the letter I had found. His hands trembled as he turned it over, saw the symbol on the back, the hourglass, and the initials, CW. Callan West. "My mother's name was Celia," he said. "Celia West." The room seemed to tilt. "She was M, wasn't she?" I asked. "The letters, they were between her and." He nodded. "His name was Benjamin. Benjamin Rhodes. Do you know that name?" I swallowed hard. I knew, a Ben. Years ago. He worked here before I owned the place. Before the trapdoor was sealed. He vanished one night. No one ever found out what happened to him. Callan's voice lowered. "My mother said he left her. She waited years. Then one day, she stopped writing. We sat in silence, the box of letters between us like an open wound. I think the answers are in here, I said finally. But we need to read them. All of them. Callan met my eyes. Together. I hesitated. Something in me wanted to say no. To retreat. To pretend this was still just a quaint bookstore and not the epicenter of a secret spanning decades. But something else, something deep, an aching nodded instead. Together. That evening, we sat at the table upstairs, letters spread out before us like puzzle pieces. The ink bled with emotion, laughter, longing, confusion, grief. Some were addressed to C, some to M, and some had no names at all. Just feelings too big for their time. You told me not to come back. But I saw the light in the window tonight. Were you watching for me? Or was that just wishful thinking? I walked past the shore, past the old rocks where we carved our names. Time erased them, but I still feel them under my skin. If you ever find these, know this, I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had no choice. They told me if I stayed, you'd be the one to disappear. The last line chilled me. I looked at Callan, whose jaw was clenched as he read. They. I whispered. Who's they? I don't know, he said. But I think someone kept them apart. I think whatever happened to Ben wasn't just about love. It was about something bigger. I stared down at the faded handwriting. Do you think your mother knew what happened to him? I think she suspected. But she was scared. And she didn't want to drag anyone else into it. My fingers brushed another letter, this one barely opened, still sealed in parts. I unfolded it carefully, and something dropped out. A photograph. Black and white, edges curled with age. Two people stood outside C.N.'s story. A young woman with storm-dark eyes and soft curls. Celia. And beside her, the man I once knew as Ben. Laughing. Alive. On the back, scrawled in rushed ink. July 1974. Before everything changed. The shadows outside lengthened. I looked up and caught Callan staring at me, not the way strangers look, but the way someone looks when they realize a story is no longer just a story. That it belongs to you too. I'm sorry, I said quietly. For not knowing. For not remembering sooner. He shook his head. You didn't forget. You just tried to survive. My throat tightened. In that moment, I wasn't just reading someone else's history. I was unraveling my own. It was nearly midnight when I found it. We had gone through half the letters, spread across the table like fallen leaves, each one tugging a little harder at the thread unraveling the past. Callan had dozed off in the armchair, a worn blanket draped over his shoulder. His breath rose and fell softly, as if even his dreams were heavy with questions. I didn't blame him. The last letter I picked up felt different. Its edges were newer, the ink darker. Tucked inside the envelope was a folded sheet and nothing else. But when I opened it, I froze. There, in elegant handwriting, was my mother's name. Evelyn Laron. I hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in years. Not since the accident. Not since the silence that followed. I read the letter again, heart pounding louder with each word. Evelyn. I know you asked me to stay out of this. But I saw what you did. I know why you told Ben to run and I know what you were trying to protect. But it's not your secret to carry anymore. If anything happens to me, the letters will explain it. Myra deserves to know. She always has. Celia. My hands shook. My mother knew Ben. She knew about the letters. About the trapdoor. About everything. And she had lied. I stood, too fast. The chair scraped against the floor, jarring Callan awake. Myra, he blinked. I handed him the letter in silence. He read it once. Then again. Your mom, he whispered. She told me she'd never been to the shop, I said numbly. Said it reminded her of someone she lost. But she never told me who. Callan was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, do you think she's the one who kept them apart? I don't know. But I did. Pieces of memory flooded back, faded images of my mother arguing in hushed tones late at night, the scent of cedar in her coat when she came home from errands, the way she once flinched when I asked about the bookstore's previous owner. She had been there. She had known Ben. And somehow, she had been part of what made him disappear. We searched the rest of the tin box, hoping for more. There was one more folded slip beneath the letters, sealed with red wax different from all the others. Callan cracked it open carefully, revealing a single name written in block letters. Dominic Harrow. Who's that? He asked. I sat slowly. Dominic was my mother's boss. Back when she worked at the town archives. He was controlling. Powerful. The kind of man you didn't say no to. You think he's involved? I think Celia did. We flipped over the note. There was an address. Not in our town but a few miles inland, toward the woods. He owns property out there, I whispered. A cabin. No one's used it in years. Callan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. So what do we do? I looked at the letter from Celia, still trembling in my hands. We follow it, I said. Whatever happened to Ben, it didn't end with the letters. It ended in that cabin. The next morning, I found myself staring at the photo again, the one of Celia and Ben outside the bookstore. This time, I noticed something else. In the corner of the photo, barely visible in the background, stood a shadowed figure. Watching. I never noticed it before. But now, it looked familiar. I dug through the drawers until I found a box of old store records, employee forms, inventory notes, dusty receipts. In one file labeled Previous Owner, I found a black and white staff photo from 1972. There he was again. Dominic Harrow. Standing beside Ben, smiling like he owned the place. I turned to Callan, my throat dry. Your mother and my mother weren't the only ones involved. Dominic worked here. Before me. Before Ben disappeared. And now he lives alone in a cabin, Callan said. With a reason to keep the past buried. The weight of it sank in. This wasn't just a romance gone wrong. It was a cover-up. And we were standing in the middle of it. That night, I finally opened the letter addressed to me. I read it slowly, each word pressing deeper into my chest. Myra. You were just a girl when it all happened. You weren't supposed to carry this. But I knew one day you'd find the floor. You always had your father's curiosity. If you're reading this, then Callan found you. And the truth is no longer safe in hiding. They said they'd protect us. But protection came with a price. Find the cabin. Find the ledger. That's where the rest of the story waits. With all my love. Celia. I folded the letter with trembling hands. Callan looked at me. We're going to that cabin, aren't we? I nodded. Because beneath the bookstore floor, we had uncovered only half the truth. And somewhere beyond the trees, the other half waited. With answers. And maybe, with Ben. We left just before sunset. Callan drove, his hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the winding road that carved through dense forest. The further we drove, the quieter the world became until even the sound of the waves faded behind us. I kept replaying the letter in my mind. Find the cabin. Find the ledger. I didn't know what I expected. Answers, maybe. Closure. But deep down, I feared the truth would come wrapped in grief. Or worse, guilt. The road ended in a gravel path lined with crooked trees. At the end stood a cabin weather-worn and cloaked in ivy, its windows like hollow eyes watching our every step. This is it, I whispered. Callan nodded. We approached slowly. The door creaked open with a groan, and the scent of rot and mildew hit like a wave. Dust clouded the air as we stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath our weight. The cabin was empty, or so it seemed. Until we saw the trapdoor. Another one. Just like the one in my shop. Nailed shut. As if someone had wanted it that way. Callan knelt beside it. Help me. We pried it open with a rusted crowbar we found near the fireplace. Beneath the floor was a small compartment lined with moldy cloth and something wrapped in oilskin. Callan pulled it out and unwrapped it gently. A leather-bound ledger. He opened it slowly. Inside were names. Dozens of them. Men and women. Dated entries. Amounts of money. Strange annotations. What is this? I breathed. He flipped pages until we found a familiar name. Benjamin Rhodes. July 1974. Transfer initiated. Request, sealed. Witness, Evelyn Laron. Handler, Dominic Harrow. My vision blurred. This wasn't just a romance, Callan said. This was something organized. Hidden. Controlled. A network, I whispered. People going missing. Silenced. Transferred. They didn't run away. They were taken. The pages listed more. Celia West's name appeared twice. Once as a witness. Once, crossed out. They kept records, I said, nausea rising. Of what they did. Who helped? Who knew too much? Callan's finger landed on one final entry. Last sealed file ML/EL. Item, ephemera/letters. Threat level, moderate. Status, buried. I stared at the initials. ML me. EL. My mother. It had always been about the letters. The truth they held. And the threat they posed to people like Dominic. My mother hadn't just known. She had helped cover it up. A noise. Both of us froze. Footsteps. Outside. Callan stuffed the ledger into his coat, motioning for silence. We crouched behind an overturned table as the cabin door creaked again. And then, a voice. I always wondered how long it would take for someone to go digging. Dominic Harrow stepped inside. Time had aged him white hair, sun-spotted skin, but the coldness in his eyes remained unchanged. He looked around slowly, his gaze landing right where we stood. You're Evelyn's girl, he said, like a memory returning. You've got her stubborn streak. And you're the man who made Ben disappear, I said, stepping forward. Callan tried to stop me. But it was too late. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Ben made himself disappear. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. He loved her, I said. He would have never left Celia. No, he agreed. He wouldn't have. That was the problem. Callan stepped beside me, voice low. Where is he? A pause. Then, to our horror, Dominic smiled. Dead, he said. Or close enough to it. Silence fell like a stone. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I wanted to scream. To hit him. To run. But instead I asked, voice trembling, why? He shrugged. Because sometimes the truth is louder than bullets. And love? That's the loudest of all. I stepped forward. You can't silence everyone. No, he said. But I silenced enough. He pulled something from his coat, an old revolver, dulled by age. Callan pushed me behind him. Give me the ledger, Dominic growled. Callan hesitated. Then. Sirens. Bright, blinding light spilled in through the windows. Sheriff's deputies flooded the cabin with flashlights and raised voices. Dominic's gun clattered to the floor as he was tackled and cuffed. It was over. Just like that. An hour later, we sat on the back steps of the cabin, under a sky full of stars, wrapped in blankets. The sheriff confirmed it. Dominic had been under suspicion for years. Untraceable connections. Vanishing people. Hidden records. But they never had evidence. Until now. And the ledger? It was enough. Callan looked over at me, quiet for a long time. I'm sorry about Ben. I nodded. My heart hurt. But not from shock. Somewhere inside, I had always known. He didn't run, I said. He was taken. And no one ever asked why. Callan reached into his coat and pulled out the photograph. Celia and Ben, caught in a moment no one could steal. He handed it to me. Now we know the whole story. I smiled, bittersweet. Not the whole story. His brow rose. What's missing? I looked at him, really looked. Then leaned in, brushing his fingers with mine. The part where we decide how it ends. A week after the arrest, the bookstore felt different. Lighter. The silence wasn't so heavy anymore. It didn't press on my shoulders the way it used to. The rain still came and went, the floorboards still creaked, and the ocean still whispered outside the windows. But now, it felt like something had shifted beneath it all. Maybe it was me. Dominic Harrow had been charged with obstruction, conspiracy, and wrongful disappearance. The ledger, the letters, and years of unspoken testimony tied together in a damning storm that couldn't be ignored. Ben's body hadn't been found, but they knew where he had been taken. An old estate along the cliffs was under excavation now. There was hope, fragile, painful hope that Celia West might finally get her answer. And me? I was still learning how to breathe. I reopened the sealed section of the store that week. It had been years since anyone had stepped beyond that shelf, but now, it felt right. I left the trapdoor uncovered, the tin of letters displayed behind a glass case with a handwritten note beside it. Love doesn't disappear. It waits. Beneath the floor. Above the heart. Some customers asked questions. Others just stood and read the note in silence. It became its own quiet tribute. To Ben. To Celia. To the people who never stopped writing letters, even when no one answered. Callan didn't leave. He stayed in town after the investigation, helping the sheriff catalog evidence, providing statements, walking the cliffs like he was trying to retrace the memories his mother never fully shared. He came to the bookstore almost every day. Sometimes to help. Sometimes just to sit quietly in the armchair where she once waited for Ben. We never forced the conversation. We let it unfold on its own. One evening, as the sun poured molten gold across the shop floor, I handed him a book. Letters Never Sent, he read, smiling. A little on the nose, isn't it? It's your kind of poetry, I replied. Truth in disguise. He sat across from me, turning the book over in his hands. I've been thinking about leaving, he said. I stiffened. Not forever, he added quickly. Just to finish the story. For her. For him. I think I need to see it through. Write it down. Make it real. I nodded slowly, heart twisting. You should. Silence hung between us. Then I said, but come back. His eyes searched mine. Do you want me to? I didn't hesitate. Yes. He left 2 days later. I stood outside the bookstore, watching his car disappear down the coastal road, a strange ache blooming in my chest. But it wasn't the kind of ache I used to carry. It was something softer. Warmer. Hope. 3 months later. A letter arrived. No return address. Just my name written in familiar, steady handwriting. Inside was a single page. Myra. The truth has weight, but so does love. I think my mother knew that. I think Ben did, too. I found the last photo in her journal of you, shelving books in the back corner of the shop. She must have taken it without you noticing. She said you reminded her of the kind of stories that never end. I want to come back. If you'll have me. Callan. I held the letter to my chest, smiling through the tears. I turned the bookstore sign to closed, walked to the back corner, and placed his letter with the others beneath the floor, where the truth had waited all along. And then I opened the door. Because sometimes, the heart remembers what the clock forgets. And love, like a letter never sent, always finds its way home. The bookstore is still here. The waves still crash beyond the cliffs. The smell of salt and ink still lingers in the air. And sometimes, when the door opens and the wind chimes stir, I still expect to find a stranger standing there dripping rain and mystery. But now, he just walks in, kisses me on the forehead, and asks if I've made tea. Callan's book sits on the front shelf now, beneath the bookstore floor. Dedicated, to my mother, and to the girl who showed me the power of a door that never fully closed. I look at him now, sitting by the window, scribbling notes on his next chapter. And I know, some stories don't have endings. Just beginnings we were brave enough to open. If this story moved you even a little, please like or comment, it helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a love story whispered just for you. We're building something special here, a space for stories that speak to the soul. I'm so glad you're part of it.